You ever notice how some people only seem to start respecting you the moment you stop putting up with their nonsense? Well, that's not magic, it's psychology. In this explainer, we are going to break down the one silent shift that makes toxic people just fade away, letting you reclaim your peace and your power for good.
Okay, let's start with a really crucial reframe. What we're talking about today isn't about losing people. It's about them losing access to the version of you they could manipulate, the version they could control. You see, the power has always been in your hands. You just need to learn how to use it.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to change your psychological password. Then, we'll learn how to stop feeding the drama. After that, we'll set up some new rules of engagement, focus on action over words, and finally, welcome in your new reality, a life of peace.
All right, first up, your psychological password. Just think of your behavior, how you act, what you allow, as the password that grants people access to your time, your energy, and your emotions. For way too long, you've probably been giving it away for free. It is time for a major update.
You know, toxic people don't just appear out of thin air. They stick around because something about your behavior signals to them that it's a safe place to operate. They're kind of like Wi-Fi thieves, right? They jump onto your network, drain all your emotional bandwidth, and then have the nerve to act offended when you finally change the password.
And this leads us to a really key concept, self-justification fatigue. It's that deep, soul-crushing exhaustion you feel from constantly having to explain why you said no, or why you need space, or why you made a certain choice. Toxic people absolutely thrive on this. They see your explanations as their way in.
So here's the bottom line. You have to stop giving these emotional TED Talks. You think you're clarifying your position, right? But a manipulator, they hear something completely different. They don't see reasons, they see loopholes. They see an invitation to debate you, to argue, and to guilt trip you until you give in.
Just look at the difference here. The old way is all apologetic and weak, basically begging for their approval. But the new way, it's simple, it's direct, and it's so powerful. When they ask why, the answer is, because that's what I chose. That's it. No anger, no long story, just calm certainty. When they don't have an entry point to argue with, their whole dynamic just crumbles.
Now let's move on to our second section, and you'll see how this all builds. It's time to stop feeding the drama. I mean, think about it. If you want to put out a fire, you have to stop throwing fuel on it. In toxic dynamics, your emotional reaction is the fuel. They feed on three things in particular: your emotional reactions when they try to provoke you, your guilt when they pressure you, and all that overthinking you do after they've left. You take these three things away, and they literally begin to starve.
Now, the psychological tool they often use is something called intermittent reinforcement. It's the exact same principle that makes slot machines and gambling so addictive. They give you just a little bit of kindness mixed in with a lot of bad behavior. It's that unpredictable pattern that keeps you hooked, always hoping for the next reward.
Your goal here is to become completely impenetrable. I want you to imagine a mosquito trying to bite a piece of solid metal. That is what you're like when you are emotionally unavailable to their provocations. They just bounce right off, and eventually they fly away to find a softer target.
Okay, on to section 3. And this is where we get tactical. We're talking about the new rules of engagement. See, most people totally misunderstand what boundaries are actually for, and that's exactly why they fail. So let's fix that right now.
This right here might be the most important rule you will ever learn about boundaries. They are not a tool to control or change other people. You can't. Boundaries are a set of rules for your behavior. They're all about what you will do to keep yourself safe.
So here's how you frame it. A boundary is a clear, actionable statement you make to yourself. For example, if my coworker yells at me, I will leave the room. Or if they bring up that topic again, I will end the conversation. But, and this is a critical warning, never, ever set a boundary you aren't prepared to enforce. An unenforced boundary just teaches people that your words mean absolutely nothing.
It's also really important to recognize that not all toxicity is the same. For the benign types, people who might just be unaware of their impact, you can use a diplomatic tool like Dear Man. That's where you describe the facts, express your feelings, assert your needs, and reinforce the outcome. But for the malignant types, the ones who intentionally cause harm, you need a much firmer strategy. That's clear up. It's about laying down the law and exercising your boundaries without getting sucked into their manipulation. All right, let's move on to our fourth point, action over words. This is where we stop talking and we start doing. It's about implementing consequences so quietly and so consistently that your behavior does all the speaking for you.
So why do all the warnings fail? It's because a toxic person fundamentally believes you are bluffing. Your whole history of giving unlimited last chances has trained them to believe they can push your boundaries without any real consequences. It's time to stop the verbal warnings. They don't work.
Instead, we're going to use a psychological process called behavioral extinction. Don't worry, it's a simple 3-step formula. First, you identify the behavior you will not tolerate. Second, you quietly remove the reward they get from it. That's your attention, your energy, your quick reply. And third, you just observe as the behavior, now that it's unrewarded, starts to fade away.
And let's be crystal clear on this. This is not about punishment. You're not being mean, you're not being manipulative. You are simply and calmly removing the reward for mistreatment. You're teaching people that respect is the price of admission for access to your life. Period.
And all of this brings us to our final and honestly most important section, your new reality. Because all of these strategies, all these tools, they mean nothing without the core internal shift of deciding that your peace is completely non-negotiable. So I want you to ask yourself this question and be really honest. Which do you value more? The temporary, fleeting approval from someone who doesn't respect you anyway, or the lasting, unshakable self-respect that comes from honoring your own needs?
Because real personal power, it begins the moment you truly accept that some people are not going to like your new boundaries. They're not going to like the new you who says no. And that is perfectly, absolutely fine. In fact, it's necessary.
You see, this is the end game. Toxic people thrive on your fear of being alone. The moment you stop chasing them, the moment you stop initiating every conversation, and you build a life that makes you genuinely happy on your own, their entire hold on you just collapses. They have no leverage left.
So, the crucial point, the one thing I really want you to take away from all of this is this. Your peace is your power. Protect it, cultivate it, and never ever trade it for anyone's approval. That right there is the silent shift that changes absolutely everything.